The flashing red and blue lights in my driveway at 6 in the morning weren't exactly how I planned to start my Tuesday, especially after spending the last 4 hours plowing snow in sub-zero temperatures. I killed the engine on my truck and climbed down from the cab, my breath forming clouds in the frigid January air. The officer was already approaching, his hand resting casually on his belt, squinting against the early morning darkness that still clung to our suburban Chicago neighborhood of Riverside Estates. "Morning, officer," I said, pulling off my work gloves. "Something wrong? You Henry Xavier?" He asked, checking his notepad. "That's me. Got a call about illegal snow removal operations. Someone said you were dumping snow into the street, creating a public hazard." He looked past me at my Ford F-350 with the commercial plow attachment, then at the perfectly cleared driveways on my street. I couldn't help but laugh, which probably wasn't the best reaction. "Illegal snow removal. Officer, I own Xavier Commercial Services. I've been licensed for commercial snow removal in Cook County for 8 years now. I was just finishing up my route." The officer's expression shifted from stern to curious. "You got documentation?" "Absolutely. Give me 1 second." I walked to the truck and grabbed my work folder from the passenger seat, then handed him my business license, my commercial vehicle registration, and my liability insurance papers. Everything was current. Everything was legitimate. He examined the documents with his flashlight, taking his time. "These look good. So you run a snow removal business?" "Yep. Got about 40 residential clients and a dozen commercial properties. Started small, grew it over the years. That's why I live here, actually. Most of my residential clients are in this area." I gestured down the street at the neatly plowed driveways, each one cleared to bare pavement. "Been at it since 2 this morning. And the snow you're plowing ends up in the street?" "Temporarily, yeah, but I always clear it afterward. See that pile down there?" I pointed to where my truck had been parked earlier. "I push the excess to designated areas that don't block storm drains or fire hydrants. It's all by the book, officer. I can show you the municipal codes if you want." He handed back my papers. "That won't be necessary." "Mind if I ask who called this in?" Before I could answer, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Officer, I'm the one who called. That man is destroying our property values with his commercial operation." I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Patricia Carmichael, president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association and the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. She was speed walking down the sidewalk in her purple parka, her phone clutched in one hand like a weapon. "Madam," the officer greeted her. "I've checked Mr. Xavier's credentials. He's fully licensed and operating legally." Patricia's face, already red from the cold, deepened to crimson. "I don't care about licenses. He's running a commercial business from a residential property. That's against our HOA covenants." "That's a civil matter, madam, not a police issue." The officer's tone had shifted to the patient but tired voice of someone who dealt with HOA disputes before. "But he's creating a public hazard. Look at all that snow in the street." I finally turned to face her. "Patricia, the street is public property. I'm allowed to temporarily stage snow there while I complete my work, and I always clear it to proper drainage areas. I've been doing this for years without a single complaint from the village. You're disturbing the peace at ungodly hours." I started to because that's when my commercial clients need their lots cleared before they open for business. The residential work comes after, and there's no noise ordinance against snow removal, especially during active snowfall. The officer closed his notepad. "Mr. Xavier is correct. Unless there's an actual violation of municipal code, there's nothing for us to address here. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "This is outrageous. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board." "You do that," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "But I haven't violated any covenants. I checked before I started my business." "We'll see about that." She spun on her heel and marched back toward her house 3 doors down. The officer gave me a sympathetic look. HOA president for the last 6 years. She's something else. Word of advice: document everything. Every job, every client, every time you clear snow. People like that don't let things go. He handed me a business card with a case number on the back. "Call this number if she harasses you or makes false reports. We take that seriously." "Thanks, officer." "I appreciate it." After he left, I finished up my route, making extra sure to clear all the street snow to the designated areas. The sun was starting to rise, painting the snow-covered roofs in shades of pink and gold. Normally, I loved this time of day, the satisfaction of a job well done and the peaceful quiet of an early morning. But Patricia's threat hung over me like a storm cloud. I'd bought my house in Riverside Estates 5 years ago, right after my business started turning a real profit. It was a nice neighborhood, the kind of place where kids played in the streets and neighbors knew each other's names. The HOA had seemed reasonable enough when I'd moved in. The covenants were standard stuff. Keep your lawn maintained, no bright paint colors, no junk cars in driveways. I'd read through every page before signing, specifically looking for anything that might conflict with my business. There was a clause about home-based businesses, but it was vague, stating that businesses couldn't create excessive traffic, noise, or detract from the residential character of the neighborhood. I'd always been careful. I parked my truck in my garage when I wasn't using it. My clients never came to my house. I did all my invoicing and paperwork online. The only time anyone even saw my business operation was during snowstorms, when I was actually out plowing. By 8 in the morning, I'd finished all my residential clients and headed home for breakfast. My wife Sarah was already up making coffee in the kitchen. She looked at me with concern when I walked in. "I heard sirens earlier," she said. "Was that here?" "Patricia called the cops on me, said I was operating illegally." Sarah's eyes widened. "What? But you have all your licenses." "I know." The officer checked everything and left, but Patricia's threatening to take it to the HOA board. I poured myself a mug of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. "She said I'm violating the covenants." "That's ridiculous. You checked all that before you even bought the house." "Doesn't matter to Patricia. She's decided I'm a problem and she's not going to let it go." Sarah sat down across from me, wrapping her hands around her own mug. "What are you going to do?" "Document everything, like the cop said, and I guess I'll wait to see what the HOA does." I rubbed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. "I just want to do my job, you know. I work hard, I follow the rules, I don't bother anyone." "I know." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out." The letter came 3 days later, delivered by certified mail. It was typed on official Riverside Estates HOA letterhead and signed by all 5 board members. Patricia Carmichael, President; Linda Morrison, Vice President; Robert Chen, Treasurer; Margaret Foster, Secretary; and Tom Wilson, Member at Large. The letter informed me that I was in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA covenants, which prohibited commercial operations from residential properties. I was given 30 days to cease all business operations or face fines of $500 per day. Additionally, I was required to attend the next HOA board meeting to address the violation. I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each pass. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, and it made no sense. I wasn't operating a storefront from my house. I wasn't seeing clients or creating traffic. I was simply using my home as a base for a mobile service business, something thousands of people did every day. I called my lawyer, Marcus Rodriguez, whom I'd used when setting up my LLC. He listened patiently while I explained the situation, then asked me to scan and email him the letter along with my HOA covenants. "Give me a day to review everything," he said. "But from what you're telling me, you've got a strong case. The covenant language is vague, and you're not violating the spirit of the rule. But HOAs can be tricky. They have a lot of latitude in interpretation. Can they really fine me $500 a day if you're in violation? Yes, but that's a big if. Let me dig into this and I'll call you tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I'd built over the past 8 years. I'd started Xavier Commercial Services with one used truck and a dream of being my own boss. I'd worked 16-hour days, taken risks, sacrificed time with Sarah to build something real. Now Patricia Carmichael, who'd probably never worked a day of manual labor in her life, was threatening to destroy it all because she didn't like seeing my truck in the neighborhood. Marcus called back the next afternoon. "Good news and bad news," he said. "Good news is you're right. The covenant doesn't actually prohibit what you're doing. It's written to prevent things like home beauty salons, repair shops, anything that brings clients to the property or creates a nuisance. Your business is mobile and doesn't create any of those issues. And the bad news: the HOA can still make your life hell while we fight it. They can levy fines, put liens on your property, and drag this out in legal proceedings. Even if you win eventually, it's going to cost you time and money." So what do I do? We have a few options. 1, you can comply with their demand and stop operating from your property. 2, you can fight it and potentially end up in litigation. 3, we can try to negotiate with the board and find a middle ground. What kind of middle ground? Maybe limited hours for when you can park your commercial vehicle on the property, or a requirement that it stays in your garage except when you're actively using it. Something that addresses their aesthetic concerns without actually stopping your business. I thought about it. I didn't want to fight if I didn't have to. Legal battles were expensive and stressful, and I had a business to run. Let's try the negotiation route first. Can you come to the HOA meeting with me? Absolutely. When is it? Next Thursday at 7. I'll be there. In the meantime, don't respond to their letter. Let me handle all communication with them. The week dragged by. I kept working, plowing through 2 more snowfalls, always extra careful to clear the streets completely and document my work with photos and timestamps. A few of my neighbors approached me to express their support. Mike Henderson, who lived across the street, told me he thought Patricia was way out of line. "You do great work," he said. "My driveway's never been clearer." Patricia just doesn't like that someone in the neighborhood has a real job instead of sitting around managing everyone else's business. It was nice to hear, but I wondered if Mike would feel the same way when Patricia turned her attention to him. People tended to keep their heads down when it came to HOA disputes. Nobody wanted to be the next target. Thursday arrived with another blast of winter weather. 6 inches of fresh snow fell throughout the day, which meant I was up at 2 in the morning again, working through my route. I finished just in time to go home, shower, and head to the HOA meeting with Marcus. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building at the entrance to Riverside Estates that hosted HOA meetings, neighborhood parties, and the occasional kid's birthday celebration. When Marcus and I arrived at 6:45, Patricia and the other board members were already there, arranging chairs and setting up a projector. Patricia's expression when she saw Marcus was priceless. Her smile froze on her face like she'd bitten into something sour. "Mr. Xavier, You didn't mention you were bringing legal representation. I didn't realize I needed permission, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand. Marcus Rodriguez, attorney at law. I'm here to help facilitate a productive discussion about my client's business operations. Patricia reluctantly shook his hand, then gestured to the chairs. Well, you'll have to wait until we get to your item on the agenda. We have other neighborhood business to address first. We took seats in the back row. A handful of other residents trickled in, most of them there for other issues. I recognized a few of them but didn't know their names. The meeting started promptly at 7, with Patricia calling everything to order and leading the board through the usual routine. Reading minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for spring landscaping, addressing a complaint about someone's Christmas lights still being up in late January. Finally, 40 minutes in, Patricia cleared her throat. Next item. We have a covenant violation issue to address with Mr. Henry Xavier, who is operating a commercial snow removal business from his residential property in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our covenants. I started to stand, but Marcus touched my arm and stood first. If I may, Madam President, I'd like to clarify the situation before we proceed. I'm Marcus Rodriguez, representing Mr. Xavier. We've reviewed the covenants in detail, and we believe there's been a misunderstanding. Patricia's jaw tightened. There's no misunderstanding. The covenant clearly states that commercial operations are prohibited. With respect, the covenant states that commercial operations that create excessive traffic, noise, or detract from the residential character are prohibited. Mr. Xavier's business is a mobile service. He doesn't see clients at his home. He doesn't create traffic to the property. His vehicle is garaged when not in use. The only time it's visible is when he's actively working, which is necessary for providing a service that many residents of this community use and appreciate. Linda Morrison, the vice president, leaned forward, but he's parking a large commercial truck on the property. That alone detracts from the residential character. Mrs. Morrison, with respect, there's no size restriction on vehicles in the covenants. Many residents have large pickup trucks, SUVs, even RVs that they park on their properties. Mr. Xavier's truck happens to have a plow attachment during winter months, but it's no larger than several other vehicles in the neighborhood. Robert Chen, the treasurer, spoke up. He was a quiet man who rarely said much at meetings. I actually think Marcus has a point. My neighbor has a massive motorhome that sits in his driveway 8 months out of the year. If we're not calling that a violation, I'm not sure how we can call Henry's truck one. Patricia shot Robert a look that could have frozen water. That's completely different, Robert. The motorhome is for personal recreational use. Henry's truck is for commercial purposes. But the covenant doesn't make that distinction, Marcus interjected smoothly. It's about impact on the neighborhood, not the purpose of the vehicle. And I'd argue that Mr. Xavier's business actually enhances the neighborhood. Many of your residents are his clients. He provides a valuable service. That's beside the point. Patricia's voice was rising. The fact is, he's running a business from a residential property. If we allow that, what's next? People opening mechanic shops, running daycare centers. We have rules for a reason. And Mr. Xavier is following those rules, Marcus said calmly. He's not opening his property to customers. He's not creating noise during restricted hours. He's not doing anything that actually violates the spirit or letter of your covenants. This seems more like a personal vendetta than a legitimate violation. The room went silent. Patricia's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. How dare you accuse me of? I'm not accusing you of anything, Marcus said, his voice still level. I'm simply stating facts. Mr. Xavier has operated his business from this property for 5 years without incident. He's been a model homeowner. Yet suddenly, after a single early morning encounter, you're threatening him with crippling fines and demanding he cease operations. That doesn't seem proportionate or reasonable. Margaret Foster, the secretary, cleared her throat. She was an older woman, probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. I have to say, I've always found Henry to be a very considerate neighbor, and he did my driveway last week. Did a beautiful job. Margaret, Patricia snapped, you're supposed to be impartial. I am being impartial. I'm just saying, I don't see how his business is hurting anyone. My late husband ran his accounting practice from our home office for 30 years. We had clients coming and going regularly. Nobody ever complained. That was different, Patricia said through gritted teeth. How? Margaret asked. How is it different? Patricia seemed to struggle for an answer. Finally, she said, because accounting doesn't involve massive trucks and piles of snow at 6 in the morning. Actually, I spoke up for the first time, I finish my residential route around 5:30. And I always clear the snow from the streets within an hour. I've never left it longer than that. You still woke up the entire neighborhood with your noise. There's no noise ordinance for snow removal, Marcus said. We checked with the village. In fact, the village encourages early snow removal so that streets are clear for morning commuters. Tom Wilson, the 5th board member who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. He was a big man, probably in his 50s, with a weathered face that suggested he'd done outdoor work at some point in his life. Look, I'm going to be honest here. I think Patricia's overreacting. Henry's not bothering anyone. He's making a living. We should be supporting our neighbors, not tearing them down over technicalities. Thank you, Tom, I said quietly. Patricia looked like she might explode. This is a board decision, not a democracy. We've identified a violation and we need to address it. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out a document, according to your bylaws, a vote of the full board is required to levy fines or enforce covenant violations. And given that at least 3 of your 5 board members seem to have reservations about this action, I don't think you have the votes. Patricia snatched the bylaws from Marcus and scanned them, her lips moving as she read. Her expression grew darker with each line. Robert Chen spoke up again. Marcus is right. We need a majority vote to proceed with enforcement. I'm voting no. This isn't a violation in my opinion. I'm voting no as well, Tom said. Margaret nodded. Make that 3. I don't see any harm being done. Patricia slammed the bylaws down on the table. Fine, but this isn't over. I'll be calling an emergency meeting to review and amend our covenants to specifically address commercial vehicles and operations. We have the authority to do that. You do, Marcus agreed. But any covenant amendments require a vote of the full membership, not just the board. That's a much higher bar to clear. And given that many of your residents are Mr. Xavier's clients and appreciate his work, I wouldn't count on that vote going your way. The meeting broke up shortly after that, with Patricia refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Several residents came up to me afterward to shake my hand and express their support. Mike Henderson from across the street was there, along with the Johnsons from down the block, and the Petersons who lived on the next street over. All of them were clients of mine, and all of them seemed genuinely angry at how Patricia had treated me. She's gone too far this time, Mrs. Peterson said. She was a tiny woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. She's been getting more and more controlling over the years. Someone needs to stand up to her. I appreciate the support, I said. I really do, but I don't want to create a big neighborhood conflict over this. You're not creating it, Mike said firmly. She is. And honestly, a lot of us are tired of it. She fined the Martins $500 last year because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. The wrong shade? Who even notices that? As we walked to our cars, Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. You did great in there. Stayed calm, didn't get defensive. That's exactly what you needed to do. So what happens now? Now, probably nothing for a while. Patricia's going to need time to lick her wounds, but she's serious about trying to amend the covenants. We'll need to be ready for that fight. How do we fight a covenant amendment? We mobilize your support. Talk to your neighbors, especially your clients. Make sure they understand what's at stake. If Patricia tries to push through an amendment that would ban your business, we need those people to show up and vote no. I nodded, feeling exhausted. I just want to plow snow, Marcus. I don't want to be involved in neighborhood politics. I know. But sometimes life doesn't give us a choice. The good news is you've got the law on your side and community support. That's a strong position to be in. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to settle down. I kept working and Patricia kept to herself. I didn't see her out and about much, which was unusual. Normally, she was everywhere, inspecting people's properties for violations, organizing neighborhood events, making her presence felt. But now, it was like she'd gone into hiding. I should have known she was planning something. The next letter came in mid-February, again by certified mail. This one informed me that an emergency HOA meeting had been scheduled to vote on amendments to the covenants. The proposed amendments included specific language prohibiting commercial vehicles over a certain size, restricting business operations of any kind from residential properties, and giving the board expanded authority to levy fines for violations. The meeting was set for 2 weeks out, and the letter included a ballot that could be submitted by mail if residents couldn't attend in person. A majority of the total HOA membership needed to vote yes for the amendments to pass. I immediately called Marcus, who'd been expecting something like this. Okay, now's when we go on offense. How many clients do you have in Riverside Estates? 17 out of about 120 total households. That's a good start. We need to talk to every single one of them and make sure they vote no. But we also need to reach beyond your client base. Are there other people in the neighborhood who might support you? A few spoke up at the last meeting. And I've had random neighbors tell me they think Patricia's being ridiculous. Good. We need to organize them. Can you put together an email or a flyer explaining your side? Yeah, I can do that. Do it tonight. Make it clear, factual, and emotional. Explain how hard you've worked to build your business. Explain how you've been careful to follow all the rules. And make it clear that if these amendments pass, it sets a precedent for the HOA to interfere in everyone's lives even more than they already do. I spent that evening drafting and redrafting a letter to my neighbors. Sarah helped me, and together we came up with something that felt honest and compelling without being whiny or aggressive. We printed copies and spent the weekend hand delivering them to every house in Riverside Estates. The response was overwhelming. People stopped me in the street to tell me they supported me. I got texts and emails from neighbors I barely knew. Some people were motivated by fairness, others by their dislike of Patricia's management style, and still others by a genuine concern about HOA overreach. Whatever their reasons, it was clear I had more support than I'd realized. Patricia tried to counter with her own letter, painting me as a scofflaw who was bringing down property values and threatening the neighborhood's character. But her letter came across as shrill and defensive, and I think it actually hurt her cause more than it helped. The night of the emergency meeting, the community center was packed. Every chair was filled and people lined the walls. I'd never seen this many residents at an HOA meeting before. Marcus and I sat near the front, and I could feel Patricia's eyes boring into the back of my head. She called the meeting to order and launched immediately into her presentation. She'd prepared a PowerPoint, complete with photos of my truck with its plow attachment, pictures of snow temporarily staged in the street, and a chart showing theoretical property value impacts from commercial operations in residential areas. "The issue before us tonight," she said, her voice dripping with false reasonableness, "is whether we want to maintain the residential character of Riverside Estates or whether we want to allow it to become a free-for-all where anyone can operate any kind of business they want." When she finished, Marcus stood up. "May I address the membership?" Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but Linda Morrison, the vice president, spoke up. "I think we should hear from both sides." Marcus walked to the front of the room. He didn't have a PowerPoint, just a single sheet of paper with some notes. "Thank you. I'll be brief. Henry Xavier has been your neighbor for 5 years. In that time, he's been a model resident. He maintains his property. He pays his HOA dues. He doesn't cause problems. His business is a mobile service that doesn't create traffic, doesn't create noise during restricted hours, and doesn't detract from the neighborhood in any meaningful way." He paused, looking around the room. "What we're really talking about tonight isn't covenant enforcement. It's whether the HOA has the authority to tell you how you can make a living. Today it's Henry and his snow plow business. Tomorrow it might be someone working from home as a consultant. The day after, it might be someone who drives a company vehicle home at night. These amendments aren't about protecting property values. They're about control. And you need to ask yourselves, how much control do you want to give to 5 people on a board?" Several people nodded. I saw Mike Henderson lean over and whisper something to his wife, who nodded vigorously. Patricia jumped back in. "That's a false equivalency. We're not talking about someone who works from home. We're talking about a commercial operation with a large vehicle that creates noise and mess. The mess is temporary and Henry always cleans it up," someone called out from the back. It was Mrs. Peterson. "And the noise is less than my neighbor's dog barking at 6 in the morning, but I don't see you trying to ban dogs, Patricia." There was a ripple of laughter through the room. Patricia's face reddened. Tom Wilson spoke up from his seat on the board. "I think we need to hear from some of Henry's clients. Anyone here who uses his services want to speak?" Hands shot up around the room. Margaret Foster, the secretary, called on people one by one. Mr. Johnson talked about how reliable and professional I was. Mrs. Martinez praised the quality of my work. Mike Henderson pointed out that I charged fair prices and always went above and beyond. One after another, my clients stood up and defended me. Then Mrs. Peterson stood up again. "I want to say something that I think needs to be said. Patricia, you've done a lot of good things for this neighborhood over the years. But lately, you've been overstepping. The thing with the Martins' mailbox was ridiculous. The fines you threatened the Chengs with over their garden gnomes were absurd. And this thing with Henry is the last straw. You're supposed to be serving this community, not ruling over it like some kind of dictator." The room erupted in applause. Patricia looked stunned, then furious. "How dare you? I've given years of my life to this community." "And we appreciate that," Mrs. Peterson said calmly. "But that doesn't give you the right to harass our neighbors for no good reason." Linda Morrison leaned over and whispered something to Patricia, who shook her head violently. Linda whispered again, more insistently this time. Finally, Patricia sat back in her chair, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Linda stood up. "I think we've heard enough debate. Let's move to a vote. All those in favor of the proposed covenant amendments, please raise your hands." I held my breath as I looked around the room. A scattering of hands went up, maybe 15 out of the 80 or so people present. All those opposed, a forest of hands shot up. I didn't even need to count to know the amendments had been decisively defeated. Linda nodded. The motion fails. The covenant amendments will not be adopted. The room buzzed with conversation. Several people came up to shake my hand or clap me on the shoulder. Marcus was grinning ear to ear. "That's about as clear a victory as you can get," he said. But I was watching Patricia. She was sitting rigidly in her chair, staring straight ahead, her face pale. Linda was talking to her quietly, but Patricia wasn't responding. Something about her expression worried me. After most people had cleared out, I approached the board table. Patricia saw me coming and stood up abruptly. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. "You've turned this entire community against me, Patricia. I never wanted that. I just wanted to do my job." "Your job, your precious job, that's more important than the rules we all agreed to follow." "I am following the rules. You just didn't like it." She grabbed her purse and her coat. "This isn't over, Henry. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll find a way to get you out of this neighborhood if it's the last thing I do." She stormed out, leaving the other board members looking uncomfortable. Tom Wilson caught my eye and shrugged apologetically. "She'll cool down eventually. Just give her time." I wasn't so sure about that. For the next month, things were quiet. Too quiet. I kept working, kept serving my clients, and kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Patricia stopped coming to HOA events. Linda Morrison took over most of the day-to-day management, and she turned out to be much more reasonable and easy to work with. Then, in mid-March, I got a call from one of my commercial clients, a shopping center in neighboring Oak Park. The property manager, a guy named Dave who I'd worked with for years, sounded tense. "Henry, I need to ask you something. Have you had any issues with your licenses or insurance lately?" My stomach dropped. "No, why?" "I got a weird call today from someone claiming to be from the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation. They said they were investigating complaints about your business and asked me a bunch of questions about your work, your credentials, whether I'd had any problems with you." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you'd ever damaged property, whether you were properly insured, whether you'd ever misscheduled work." I told them you were great, never had a single issue, but the whole thing felt off. "Did they give you a name?" "Yeah, let me check my notes." Said her name was Carol Henderson from the licensing division. I thanked Dave and immediately called the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone who could help me. "I'm calling to check on the status of my commercial snow removal license. I heard there might be an investigation." The woman on the other end typed for a moment. "I'm not showing any investigations or complaints associated with your license number. It's current and in good standing." "Is there someone named Carol Henderson in your licensing division?" More typing. "No one by that name works here." I felt cold. "So if someone called one of my clients claiming to be Carol Henderson from your office, they'd be lying. That would be fraudulent misrepresentation, yes. If that happened, you should file a police report." I called Marcus next and explained what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. "You think it's Patricia? Who else would it be? She threatened me after the vote, said she'd find a way to get me out of the neighborhood." Impersonating a government official is a crime, but we need to be careful. "Do you have proof it was her?" "No, just the timing and the motive." "Call all your commercial clients. Find out if any of the others got similar calls. If there's a pattern, we'll go to the police." I spent the rest of the day calling clients. Out of my 12 commercial accounts, 5 had received calls from Carol Henderson. They'd all been asked similar questions, and all had given me positive reviews. But the fact that someone was trying to sabotage my business was terrifying. Marcus and I went to the Riverside Police Department that evening. The officer who took my report was professional but not particularly optimistic. Without proof that it was this Patricia person, there's not much we can do. The phone calls came from a blocked number, so we can't trace them. But I'll file the report and make a note of the situation. If anything else happens, call us immediately. I left feeling frustrated and anxious. Patricia had escalated things beyond HOA petness into actual criminal behavior, but proving it would be difficult. 2 days later, I got a call from the village of Riverside Public Works Department. They'd received a complaint that I was illegally dumping snow in areas that blocked storm drains and created flooding hazards. An inspector was coming out to investigate. This time I was ready. I'd been documenting every single job with photos showing exactly where I placed snow and confirming that drains were clear. When the inspector arrived, I showed him everything. He looked through my photos, checked my records, and nodded approvingly. "You're doing everything right," he said. "More than right, actually. This is some of the most thorough documentation I've seen. Whoever filed that complaint was either mistaken or lying." "Can you tell me who filed it?" He checked his clipboard. "Anonymous. Came in through our website complaint form." Anonymous, of course. Over the next 3 weeks, I dealt with an escalating series of harassments. Someone filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau claiming I damaged their property and refused to pay for repairs. It was completely fabricated, and the BBB closed it after I provided documentation, but it took time and stress to deal with. Someone else reported me to the IRS for alleged tax evasion. That triggered an audit that would take months to resolve, even though my books were clean. Through it all, I had no proof it was Patricia. Everything was anonymous or untraceable, but I knew, and she knew I knew. I started seeing her around the neighborhood again, and she'd give me these little smirks, like she was enjoying watching me suffer. Sarah was worried. "This is getting scary, Henry. She's not going to stop." "I know, but what can I do? I can't prove anything. Maybe we should just move, find somewhere else to live where we don't have to deal with this." "No." I surprised myself with the vehemence of my response. "No, we're not running. We bought this house. We built a life here. I'm not letting her drive us out." But I was scared. I was exhausted from dealing with constant complaints and investigations, even though I was always exonerated. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and Patricia seemed to have an endless supply of knives. Then, in early April, I got a call from Mike Henderson. "Henry, you need to know something. I was leaving for work this morning and I saw Patricia putting something on your windshield. I watched her, and she was carrying a stack of flyers. She put them on cars up and down the street." "What kind of flyers?" I grabbed one after she left. "Hang on, I'll read it to you." There was a rustling sound. It says, "Warning to Riverside Estates residents. Unlicensed contractor operating in neighborhood. Henry Xavier of Xavier Commercial Services is not properly licensed and insured. Using his services puts you at legal and financial risk. For your safety and protection, use only verified licensed contractors." My blood ran cold. That's completely false. I'm fully licensed and insured. She's committing libel. "I know that. But Henry, she put these on at least 30 cars. People are going to see them. I need to see one of those flyers. Can you bring it to me?" Mike came over within 15 minutes. The flyer was printed on bright yellow paper with bold red lettering, designed to catch attention and create alarm. At the bottom, in smaller print, it said, "Concerned citizens for community safety." I took a photo of it and immediately sent it to Marcus along with a text explaining what had happened. He called me back within 5 minutes. "This is it. This is what we need. That flyer is demonstrably false and defamatory. It's designed to harm your business, and if we can prove Patricia distributed it, we've got her." Mike saw her doing it. Mike would testify to that. I think so. Let me ask him. Mike agreed without hesitation. I'm done watching her bully people. If I can help stop her, I will. Marcus drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon and had it hand-delivered to Patricia's house. It detailed the false statements in the flyer, identified Mike as a witness to her distributing them, and demanded that she stop all harassment and defamatory actions against me or face a lawsuit. I thought that might be the end of it, but I'd underestimated how far Patricia was willing to go. 2 days after the cease and desist was delivered, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Henry Xavier of Xavier Commercial Services?" "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Agent Williams from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. We've received a report that you're illegally disposing of snow containing road salt and chemical contaminants in protected wetland areas. I need to schedule an inspection of your disposal sites." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's absolutely not true. I dispose of snow in designated areas approved by the municipalities I work in. Nevertheless, we're required to investigate all reported violations. Can you meet me tomorrow at 10 at the Riverside Estates Community Center to discuss this? Something about her tone felt off, but I agreed. When I told Marcus about it, he insisted on coming with me. We showed up at the community center at 9:45 the next morning. No one else was there. We waited until 10:15, but no Agent Williams ever appeared. I called the number back, but it went to a generic voicemail. Marcus had a grim expression. "Call the EPA's main office. Ask if they have an Agent Williams." They didn't. Another fake complaint, another impersonation. But this time there was a phone number, which meant there might be a way to trace it. We went straight to the police station. This time we got a different officer, a detective named Sarah Reeves, who actually seemed interested in the case. She listened carefully as I explained everything that had happened over the past 2 months. The fake government calls, the anonymous complaints, the defamatory flyers, and now the impersonation of an EPA agent. "You're sure all of this is connected to this HOA president?" Detective Reeves asked. "Morally sure, yes. But I only have direct proof of one thing, the flyers. I have a witness who saw her distributing them." "That's a start. Let me get his statement, and I want you to give me copies of everything you've documented. Every complaint, every fake call, every interaction with Patricia Carmichael. Let's see if we can build a pattern." Over the next week, Detective Reeves worked the case hard. She interviewed Mike Henderson, who gave a detailed statement about seeing Patricia distribute the flyers. She talked to several of my commercial clients who'd received the fake government calls. She pulled phone records and traced the number that had called me about the EPA inspection. And that's where things got interesting. The number was a prepaid cell phone, purchased at a convenience store in Oak Park with cash. But the store had security cameras, and Detective Reeves got the footage. It showed Patricia buying the phone 2 days before the calls started. With that evidence, Detective Reeves brought Patricia in for questioning. I wasn't there, but Marcus got the details afterward from the detective. Patricia had initially denied everything, but when confronted with the video evidence, she'd crumbled. She admitted to making the calls, distributing the flyers, and filing the false complaints. She claimed she was just trying to protect the neighborhood from my commercial invasion. But her justifications rang hollow even to her own ears. Detective Reeves arrested her on the spot. The charges included criminal impersonation of a government official, harassment, filing false police reports, and defamation. It was serious stuff, potentially adding up to several years in prison if she was convicted. The news spread through Riverside Estates like wildfire. People were shocked, angry, and in some cases vindicated in their suspicions about Patricia's behavior. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove her as president. Linda Morrison took over, and one of her first acts was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the association. The court proceedings took months. Patricia hired a lawyer who tried to argue that she'd been under severe stress and hadn't understood the seriousness of her actions. But the evidence was overwhelming. She'd conducted a sustained campaign of harassment against me, using illegal means and false accusations. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In August, Patricia pleaded guilty to reduced charges as part of a plea deal. She got 6 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, and was ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees and the lost business I could demonstrate from her actions. She also had to issue a public apology and correction for the false statements in her flyers. The day her apology was published in the Riverside Community Newsletter, I finally felt like I could breathe again. It was over. Really, truly over. My business had actually grown during all of this. The publicity from the case had brought me new clients who appreciated my professionalism and the fact that I'd stood up to harassment. Other HOA boards in the area reached out to make sure their covenants didn't have similar ambiguities that could be abused. I even got calls from other home-based business owners who'd faced similar issues, thanking me for fighting back. Sarah and I decided to stay in Riverside Estates. Despite everything that had happened, it was still home. Our neighbors had supported us, and the new HOA board under Linda's leadership was fair and reasonable. Patricia's house went up for sale shortly after she was sentenced, and a nice young couple with 2 kids bought it. They were friendly and normal, and I plowed their driveway that first winter without incident. On a cold morning in December, almost a year after Patricia had first called the cops on me, I was out plowing after a major snowstorm. It was 5:30, the sky was just starting to lighten in the east, and I was finishing up my residential route. I pushed a final pile of snow to the designated drainage area, cut the engine, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Mike Henderson was out early, warming up his car. He saw me and walked over. "Great job, Henry. Driveway looks perfect." "Thanks, Mike. Sorry about the early morning noise," he laughed. "Are you kidding? I'd rather wake up to the sound of your plow than have to dig out my car before work. Keep doing what you're doing." As he drove off, I looked around at the peaceful neighborhood, at the houses with their warm windows glowing in the pre-dawn darkness, at the neatly plowed driveways ready for another day. This was why I did what I did. Not for drama or conflict, just to provide a good service and make an honest living. I started the truck and headed home to Sarah and a hot cup of coffee. Life was good. The business was thriving. The neighborhood was at peace. And I'd learned something important. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't just about you. It's about standing up to bullies everywhere, about protecting the right of people to live their lives without harassment, and about proving that someone with power can't just destroy someone else's livelihood because they don't like them. The sun broke over the horizon as I pulled into my garage, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day.